So after you do this, enough times, and honestly, I've done this part of the model probably about 10 times trying to get these videos worked out. So I knew ahead of time I was going to use a tangent relation here. But don't be afraid to try it one way, see how it looks, try it the other way, see how it looks, and then make your decision from there. There's not going to be a set of rules that applies to every situation. You're going to have to understand the tools you have, what they mean, how to use them, and that's the only way you're going to be able to apply that to the situations you run into. For this handle over here, I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to add a horizontal relation. And I'm going to look at this thing from the side, see how well it matches up. Now, obviously my line looks like it might be a little bit high, but we've got some extra stuff on this blueprint that's kind of blocking it for us. I'm going to go ahead and just add a dimension here. 1900 seems like a good number. And over here, let's see what we have. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to make them both the same, 1900. And that looks like it fits pretty well. Like I said, this is just going to be a general representation. We're not worried about getting everything as precise as possible. So we have this nice spline here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on it, show curvature, and just see what we're working with. Now this right here, this looks pretty nice. There's no steps or jogs. We have the same weight on each of these handles. And I think it looks pretty good, and I'm going to be happy with that, so I'm just going to go ahead and run with it. One quick note here on these spline handles, you have three options here. You have this endpoint, this arrow, and this little arrow icon here. This endpoint allows you to change, actually let me just draw a new one here to show you. So this endpoint allows you to change both the direction and the weight of the handle. This arrow here only allows you to change the weight, not the direction. This one here only allows you to change the direction and not the weight. And there's another option. If you right click on the spline, you can see you have several options here. You can show curvature combs, show inflection points, radius. The one I want to show you is control polygons. Now this essentially draws a line between your handles. It allows you to basically modify both handles at the same time. If you came in here and you inserted a spline point, it's going to change the control polygon here. Now I know this is kind of hard to see in front of this blueprint, but hopefully you can see that now we have 4 points of control here. Let me go ahead and select this, show curvature, and show you what I was talking about. Now you can see the curvature combs here. There's a really defined step right in this area, and if you notice, it coincides with that extra spline point we added. As I drag these handles around, it changes, but these are things that you need to be aware of when you're creating these splines. Now I could easily go ahead and create another spline and drag these handles and get a very similar shape to that. Drag these in and show curvature. Now that is a very different curvature comb. So this is why I say, use as few spline points as possible. And one thing you can do, if you think you might need a third point in there, do as much as you can with two. You can right click on it, you can insert a spline point later, and if you do that, that spline point, you can see that the handles are grayed out. You haven't actually adjusted those handles yet. And until you do, they're going to remain in a minimum energy situation. And once you start dragging on these, then you're going to start inducing some funny curvature. You can go back and you can right click on this, and you can show the inflection points and things. But you really want to be careful when you start adding these spline points. And you can always go in, you can select it, you can delete it, and go back to fewer spline points. That's just a little a little thing to be aware of, this spline, if you took the curvature combs off, yeah, it looks, it looks fine. But if you were to use that to create a surface, then you would probably not be happy with the results, or somebody wouldn't be. You might be fine with them. Alright, so now that we're done with this spline, let's go ahead, exit this sketch. I'm going to turn that blueprint off, and I want to create a new sketch on the top midplane. Now when we created this spline on the right plane, we had that vertex to snap to. In this case, we don't. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is select that endpoint, select that mid-front plane, which I know we're drawing to, and add a coincident relation. So that basically gives me freedom to drag this left and right, but it's stuck to that plane. And what that means is when I come back and draw a sketch on that mid-front plane, I know both of these endpoints are in plane, and my sketch is going to be able to actually have a coincident relation with them. I'm going to go ahead, add a tangent relation with that, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on the top blueprint. Alright, so what I want to do, since I plan these planes out where the curvature actually changed direction, I'm going to go ahead and make that vertical. Alright, so now the handles look pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and just add these dimensions, lock these handles in place, and give that 2000. Alright, and you notice the spline is still blue, and that's because we don't have a dimension there to the center line. I'm going to go ahead and give that a 600. So you can see it doesn't exactly fall on there. These numbers are working out to be pretty nice numbers, so I'm just gonna live with that. And drag this around, turn that blueprint off, and take a look at what we have so far. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and save this and create a sketch on that mid-front plane. Use a spline, select these endpoints just like we did for the past couple ones. Over here, I'm going to add that horizontal relation because we're going to mirror about that plane. I'm going to go ahead and turn this around, and I'm going to add some construction lines here. I'm going to add this vertical line, and I am going to add a dimension here. But first, I'm going to turn that front blueprint on because we actually had, a rough outline of that, because that is visible from the front. So I'm going to use these handles. I'm going to drag them around until the shape looks good to me, and then I'm going to apply a dimension. Let's see what we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and give that 12 degrees, and I'll give it 1250 for a dimension. And we'll give that one 1250 also. Alright, before I get out of here, I'm just going to look at the curvature real quick. Alright, so here's an interesting thing. You're looking at these combs, and the curvature actually, let me turn this blueprint off, it might be easier to see. It goes up, and then it cuts back down pretty hard. That might not give us what we want in terms of a surface. So I'm going to knock this back, and let's maybe change this to 1300. Yeah, you see now we're crossing over down here. We're getting some interesting geometry. I'm just going to roll with 1300. And let's kick this down some more and see what we get. Alright, I think that looks a little bit better. It's tapering off down here. But I know that the body line on this thing is actually going to go from here, and it's going to cut back this direction. So we're going to have a hard seam. We're probably going to have a fillet or some sort of blend at that intersection. So I'm not worried about actually matching curvature from here down to this bottom surface. And again, this is a very general representation, not trying to make a perfect model of this thing. So you really have to make the decision. What are you using your model for? What can you live with? You know, how much time do you want to spend